It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're talking Glenn reprising her role as Granny in Hoodwinked Too, Hood vs. Evil.
Time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today is back again, and I have dubbed him my unofficial animation correspondent, having previously joined me for episodes of Gandahar, aka Light Years, and Hoodwinked. Welcome back, curator at Sporcle, Christof.
Hello! Very, very happy to be back, even if I had to watch Hoodwinked Too for the pleasure of doing it.
I believe the full government name is Hoodwinked Too, Hood versus Evil. Thank you very much.
I apologize.
Yes. I really appreciate you for coming back just a month later to discuss the continuing saga of Hoodwinked that then abruptly came to an end after this movie.
I wonder why.
I wonder why, indeed. Well, maybe we'll get into that. But before we talk Glenn in Hoodwinked 2, I do, of course, know your relationship to Glenn Close, as you talked about on your first episode, and you told me your idea for a Glenn role in your second episode, which was her working with Pedro Almodovar and Penelope Cruz, which we have seen from both Glenn and Penelope being in La Bola Negra at Cannes, that this could be their foot in the door to working properly together on screen in a Spanish film.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Right? Yes. But for my alternative question for you this time around, if you could recast Glenn Close in a Best Actress nominated role, what would it be and why?
Well, when you gave me the question, my immediate first thought was going through her contemporaries and looking at who she was nominated against, because that was basically my starting point, and I very quickly gravitated towards Anna, the Sally Kirkland nomination, because I think that would be a fun part for her. It would stretch her muscle and an interesting role to play. The reason why I discarded that very quickly, though, is that I really don't want to take Anna away from Sally Kirkland, because she's very good in it. And the story behind her nomination is such a great one. So I then looked a bit at old Hollywood, and if there were any classic star nominations that I would love to see her in, and I want her to have some fun. So the Barbara Stanwyck role in Ball of Fire is something that I immediately thought is something where she would really enjoy herself, where maybe would see a side from her that she doesn't get to show too often. And if you really think about it, all of Barbara Stanwyck's nominated performance kind of would make sense for her. And from there, it's a very short way to Double Indemnity, where I think this is an absolutely perfect role for her. Show her icy, villainous side. This is something where I would really love to see her sink her teeth in. It's either this or Jean Tierney in Leave Her to Heaven. Some steely, villainous part. This is something that would really be fascinating to see her tackle something like that, because it plays to one of her strengths, and it would be fun to watch. So this is where I would choose to go for her.
Wow. Well, you are really speaking my language, because Barbara is one of my old Hollywood favorites, as people know. Imagining her as Sugarpuss O'Shea in Ball of Fire is a wild image that I'm conjuring right now. I could just picture her dancing and entertaining those professors and Having a ball. Yeah, you're right. And I think like Stella Dallas would be so heartbreaking from her too if she could do something like that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Barbara Streisand was such a well-rounded actress, and
Hmm.
I think Glenn Close is too. Some people maybe think of her mainly in terms of Fatal Attraction and steeliness or whatever, but
Yeah.
I think she can be a lot of fun, and people sometimes tend to forget that.
Yeah.
And we should let her show that.
We should. She should be allowed to do that, as she said in her Golden Globe speech. Um,
Yeah.
yes. And now I'm thinking of like Sorry Wrong Number. That would be so fun for her too. So the possibilities are endless. I love this. But yeah, obviously Gene Tierney is like a forerunner to a lot of what Glenn would do. And so, yeah.
The jealousy that basically you can draw a line from her to Fatal Attraction. So
Very that.
that's almost a bit too easy of an answer, which is why I think Double Indemnity would be even my favorite choice rather than Leave It to Heaven. But it's something I can't not think of when I think of Glenn in old Hollywood movies.
Yes, and think about the wonderful fake wig she would be wearing and the costumes. She always loves her costumes. So yeah, that would be delicious. All right. Wow. And I'm also thinking of like Gene Tierney and Fatal Attraction now. Like I'm going off on my own little thing, probably to distract from the movie we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I think we'll have to get into it sooner or later, though.
I suppose we've done enough delaying the inevitable. It is time to talk about Hoodwinked 2, Hood versus Evil. Okay, so after fully committing to Damages for 3 seasons, this is Glenn returning to the big screen, at least in voice form here, in 4 years. So Hoodwinked 2, Hood vs. Evil is the sequel to Hoodwinked from 2006, in which Glenn played Granny, a take on Little Red Riding Hood's Granny, who is an extreme sports junkie and subverts all expectations you might expect from her. So plans were in the works for a Hoodwinked sequel as the first film was coming out. Corey Edwards did not return to direct this, though, citing disagreements with some of the key players during the filming of the first film, which is kind of interesting. He also said he wanted to be seen as more than just the hoodwinked guy, in his words. So Mike Disa, who had a long worked in animation at Disney prior, made the jump up to directing this as his first feature film. Glenn reprised her role as Granny, as did Patrick Warburton as Wolf, David Ogden Stiers as Nicky Flippers, and Corey Edwards as Twitchy, but there were a few key replacements here. Martin Short took over as Kirk the Woodsman for Jim Belushi, and Anne Hathaway did not return as Red. She was replaced by Hayden Panettiere. There is a funny quote from Corey Edwards that I found about Anne Hathaway not reprising her role, which is very blunt and to the point and probably completely accurate. So he said, "Have you seen her career lately? She has skyrocketed. It's clear to me that her involvement in the first film was a nice favor to Harvey and the last of her little girl roles. Right after Hoodwinked, she did The Devil Wears Prada and Get Smart and Rachel Getting Married. You can see how a sequel to an animated film is not in her trajectory anymore. I'm really happy for everything that is happening for her right now. Hayden Panettiere is really perfect to take over the role since we are taking Red into more of the teen Supergirl mode anyway."
Way to throw shade at your own movie.
I know, yeah. You don't want to be slumming it with us.
And your lead actress.
And your lead actress, too. Yeah, that's true. Yikes. Anyway, so to get into a summary here, Hoodwinked 2, Hood vs. Evil follows Red, Granny, Wolf, and Twitchy as they've joined the Happily Ever After agency headed by Nicky Flippers, going around solving various fairy tale-related crimes. Red is also training as part of the Sisters of the Hood, a sort of martial arts organization comprised of all women, learning the art of kung fu. And so while Red is away, Granny, Wolf, and Twitchy are on a mission to save Hansel and Gretel, voiced by Bill Hader and Amy Poehler, from potentially being eaten by a witch named Verushka, voiced by Joan Cusack. But the mission is botched when Verushka absconds with Hansel and Gretel and also kidnaps Granny. And it's soon revealed that Verushka is after a truffle recipe, with only Granny and certain members of the Sisters of the Hood knowing about the secret ingredient. And the truffle, when assembled with the right ingredients, grants the consumer enhanced powers. So Red soon returns from the Sisters of the Hood and tries to rescue Granny, while Wolf and Twitchy try to do the same, with some cute little twists and turns and reveals along the way. So Christof, here we are, Hoodwinked 2. Tell me your thoughts on this sequel to Hoodwinked, which I believe you had not watched before this week, unlike the first one.
I have never watched this before.
Yes.
I'm not saying I watch it against my will because I agreed to do this, but I'm not gonna rewatch it anytime soon.
Yes.
I want to begin this with a compliment, but I'll have to compliment you because I can't really compliment the film. What I really appreciate about you is when I listen to you, you always try to highlight the positives. And even if you don't like a film, you really try and make it appear that you seek to uplift the elements about the film that you like.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be really excited. What are you going to do with this film now? Because
how am I going to spin this as a
this
positive? Yeah, you're right.
is this the worst film you have watched for this podcast so far? And I apologize for this so far.
So far, yeah, we got some good ones coming. Probably, yeah, I would say one with like not really any redeeming qualities. Maybe one or two we could highlight, but yeah, it's way down there, way down there.
This is really. I mean, we had some nice things to say about the first one because at the core, the first one has a fun story that it slowly reveals. I mean, you'll have to ignore the final act, but the first 2/3 of the first film are fun to watch. It reveals its plot layer by layer. There are twists that are fun. This one does not really have that. It keeps introducing characters even well into the second half. With every new scene, there are two or three additional characters with a backplot of their own. And here are the three little pigs, and they are mercenaries now. And here's this giant ass spider, which apparently everyone knows about and is suddenly scared of. And while it does throw in many twists, the twist is always the same twist. It's either this character that you thought who was evil is actually good, or this character who you thought was good is actually evil. So you can kind of guess after some time that what's gonna happen next. Our other major complaint about the first film was the bad quality of the animation. And naive as I am, I thought, well, for this one, they had a lot more money. They will probably be able to at least have decent animation. It's just as bad, if not even worse. Because if you look at it, it all looks like maybe a first draft where you have to say, okay, now you should add details and texture and all the things that makes it interesting to look at, because everything looks so flat and everything looks so bland. And it's not just the character design and the background design itself. The action scenes are absolutely dull. And I must say, I don't expect animated movies to follow the laws of physics. I do expect animated films to follow the laws of cartoon physics. So a character doesn't need to follow the laws of gravity unless he realizes he just currently doesn't follow the laws of gravity. In these action scenes, characters are just floating through the air like little dolls that a kid plays with, and then ooh, woo, woo, it's flying. There's never any sense of threat. They keep falling down from huge heights, and then maybe say ouch when they land down there. It's just never interesting to watch because these action scenes aren't very good or exciting. So on a plot level and on an animation level, I found just nothing here that I really enjoyed. I just felt I kept getting bombarded with characters and with plot developments and strange things. And I struggle to find things I really enjoyed about this film.
Wow. Well, what did you think of Glenn? Was that a positive?
Well, Glenn was second billed in the film.
Yeah.
Which, good for her.
Sure.
Yeah, I have no negatives or positives. She's basically the same thing as in the first movie. She reprises the character. She does the same things there. She does it good. She has only so much to work with. Her character doesn't really get any new beats. She's still the cool granny who rides the motorcycle and is super fit and knows how to help herself, and she's absolutely great. There's nothing new to her character, and that's not something that is Glenn's fault because she doesn't write the script. She does the best she can do with what she's given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I pretty much agree with both of your points about the movie and with Glenn. Unfortunately, this was a rough one. First of all, I do understand wanting to be faithful to the original's animation style just for consistency, but to your point, it does somehow look worse, despite having 4 times the budget. Like, the first one was 8 million, this one was 30 million. And to me, this looks like one of those direct-to-video Disney sequels that was just like a cash-in, and it just feels like the B team took over, and it just looks cheaper, you know? The background, like you said, is weirdly static. Even the mouth movements look stiffer to me. The facial expressions aren't as active, and I just find it very unpleasant to look at most of the time, which is obviously a huge distraction. And, you know, where I do think the first film had the fun little conceit with the mystery structure, the whole Rashomon Jr. edition quality of it, this one just completely avoids any real mystery or clever conceit other than, I guess, the reveal, which, like you said, it's like, oh, Hansel and Gretel actually are not good. They're actually evil. And the witch is actually not really that evil. She's actually just misunderstood. So, sure, okay. And so, I mean, Bill Hader and Amy Poehler, I do think, are fun here. They're clearly having fun in the voice booth. But yeah, I feel like watching this, I was like, I don't know if I actually care about these characters, these our heroes, like, at all, honestly. Like, Granny is fun, of course, and, you know, I like Glenn still kind of pitching her voice differently than how she normally speaks and really playing with different levels, but I don't know, it just feels like the emotional heart is not there, the story doesn't really hit, it feels chaotic, it doesn't really even have, like, a strong through line for me, and I guess the conflict between Red and Wolf is something they came up with, but it just feels very forced to me and like not really organic to anything.
It's like in a cop movie when the two main cops just constantly arguing. So it feels like
Yeah.
we need to have some conflict in there because of I don't know why. It's just the way things are done. So
Yeah.
they are constantly fighting. And of course, they're making up at the end because then at the end they realize, oh, we work together as a team. It doesn't feel natural to anything. It just feels very much written in a way because people thought, well, let's try that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just is not organic. It feels like they kind of realized that they didn't have a good through line as they were writing this, and they're just like, well, let's just shoehorn in this like internal conflict, even though it doesn't really, I don't know, what does it factor into anything, really? So, and I also feel like the inclusion of all these pop culture references were so grating. I don't remember there being so many in the first one, but like all of them are obviously so uninspired. Like the Hannibal Lecter one or the Goodfellas one. I think these are supposed to be for the parents watching with their kids, but they don't even really do anything super fun with them. And I wasn't laughing,
Yeah.
so it just it's lazy.
The Goodfellas quote was especially grating because it wasn't a Joe Pesci impression. It wasn't trying to outdo Joe Pesci. It was just saying the line almost as if you weren't aware that this is actually a quote you're
Yeah.
speaking.
Right. So very weird and again shoehorned in. So for me, it just is kind of a movie without a lot of purpose. Like, what would you even say is really the driving force or like the takeaway from the film compared to the first one, even? Because that one is, I feel like that one was kind of about family and like coming together a little bit by the end, and you know, not judging a book by its cover, all those kinds of things, classic fairy tale stuff. What does this do?
Working together as a team, maybe,
Sure.
or truffles are great.
Truffles are great. They made a point there. That's true. It's good to remind people that truffles are great.
German kids are evil. Maybe that.
Yes. And can you speak on that? Are German kids evil?
Well, I used to be very evil when I was little, but I grew out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they have a point to that.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, you are the German expert as well from this podcast, so I had to ask. Also, are those accents from Bill Hader and Amy Poehler? Would you say that those are pretty accurate? Or are they very stereotypical?
I mean, they're probably in this general, vaguely Austrian Bavarian accent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that the general way when Germans speak English, it's more like this now when the th doesn't quite work, and the v's and w's are a bit problematic, and the r's are a bit more pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's more of the stereotypical German accent, I would say.
Yeah,
This is maybe more the way Germans actually sound when they're speaking English, but I understand that Arnold Schwarzenegger did a lot to define the way
that's true.
native German speakers sound like when they speak English, even although it's maybe a very specific Steiermark thing when he's talking like that.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger also sounds very odd when he's speaking German, so it's just his German sounds just as weird as his English does.
That's good to know. Yeah. Well, anyway, one thing of note that I did just notice right off the bat is it starts with a full credit sequence with the whole cast of characters across a black screen, which is kind of fascinating way to start. I don't remember the first one doing that, but yeah, and the part where it says and Wayne Newton as Jimmy Ten Strings really took me out. I mean, that was just like, what are we in for? And it turns out not really anything because that doesn't even matter. That character.
Yeah, I mean, he's in one scene, like many characters are in one scene.
Yep.
Heidi Klum is in two scenes,
Heidi
but
Klum
she's
is
barely in both of them.
Yeah, I know. And we also get a nice recap, which is rather poorly rendered, I would say, with like scenes from the first film kind of superimposed over the pages of like a storybook. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh boy, this is going to be a trip.
Yeah, and there's narration by David Ogden Stiers at the beginning,
Sure.
and then the narration just stops for the rest of the movie.
Yep.
It's just really just there to recap, as in previously in a TV show.
Yes. So it doesn't quite compare to what I talked about last week with Damages Season 3 in their recap. So just saying, there's a way to do a recap well, and this was not really one of them. But anyway, we drop in on the gang. They're infiltrating this situation at this gingerbread house, I guess. And again, really the first thing I took note of right away is just how cheap it all looks. And it's, again, like not even charming, sort of like scrappy, where they kind of stretch the budget with the first one. Like it barely looks above video game graphics from 2010. So I'm just like automatically turned off watching it within the first 5 minutes.
It was also a bit taken aback that Hansel and Gretel looked like 4-year-olds, because I know they're
Yes.
kids, but they look like really, really small kids, which was surprising me a bit.
Yes. But also little baby geniuses who are like evil masterminds at the same time.
But we don't know that yet at the beginning. We
Sorry.
only know that halfway through.
Yes.
You're spoiling the twist.
I'm so sorry. I know it completely ruins the experience to know that off the bat. So, yeah, I don't feel like a particular emotional investment in like the whole thing of Red and Wolf having tension. The dynamic does not really work for me. It actually reminded me a little bit of like eventually what Disney would do with Zootopia with Judy and the other character played by Jason Bateman that I forgot.
Nick?
Nick, yes, very good. That feels like a proto, like what that would be done well. This is like what is not done well. That's what it was reminding me of on this second film.
I mean, in the first scene, Wolf is annoyed that Red is not there because she's in training.
Yeah.
And that's apparently reason enough for him to be annoyed with her, that she's training.
Yeah. I get mad at my friends when they're not hanging out with me and they're training for something. So it's only fair.
And I mean, kind of in universe, it's her job that she's training for, a job of being a super crime fighting, whatever it is the job description of Granny is.
Yes.
She's in training to be Granny.
She isn't training to be Granny. Yeah, following her granny's footsteps. But it's sort of like we're kind of introduced to the idea of like, okay, I guess this film is about like the importance of togetherness and found family, but that's where I realized, like, in watching the second one, how these films are so much better just as kind of joke factories and riffing on fairy tales, more so than the actual straightforward drama of the characters, which just feels so much like an afterthought to me.
Yeah. And it's not as good as at riffing on fairy tales as Shrek is, so
Certainly
there's
not.
not even much of a point to that.
No. And also, you know, as we get to that plot of Granny getting kidnapped, even some of the writing of these lines don't sound as sharp as the first one to me. Like, some of these lines that sound like they're supposed to be like clever jokes, but they just kind of lie there. Like, I think it's when she's being kidnapped and she tells Verushka, as Verushka's like flying her away on her broomstick or whatever, she's like, "You have the right to a fairy godmother. If you do not have a fairy godmother, one will be provided for you." This sounds like it's supposed to be a joke, but like, what is the joke?
Yeah, I also wonder, did we already know that Granny's first name is Abigail in the first film? I'm not
No.
sure she is so aggressively called Abigail in this film throughout.
Yeah.
I don't remember that being her name. I remember it as just being Granny,
Yeah.
but the film makes the point that she's called Abigail.
Yeah. Sure. I guess so. We're building out her character this time and actually giving her a backstory and defining her more than just as Red's Granny. So at least the film gives us that, if nothing else. I want to also talk about this whole storyline with Red and the Sisters of the Hood, where she's off in some distant land being trained in the art of Kung Fu. And
The Sisterhood of Kung Fu Bakers.
yes, there we go. And her challenge, as we're introduced to it, is like this big ogre who basically looks like a mutated Shrek with like 4 arms and is speaking in a very stereotypical like AAVE accent, which feels ill-advised at best. I'll say that. Case in point, a line I wrote down here where he says, I even taste evil. Ooh, I taste just like chicken. Chicken and evil. I'm gonna do my little evil chicken dance.
My main takeaway from this particular scene is that in the scene also Red does a bungee jump.
Yes.
The score, the soundtrack choice for the bungee jump is a really odd one because it kind of reminded me of those 1980s soap operas because it's some grand orchestral thing, but not really exciting in the way that you think an action scene would usually be scored with. It was a bit bizarre.
Also, I feel like the stuff with the hood doesn't really come into play here much, or the cape hood situation that Red has with the flying. I feel like that doesn't really apply as much as it did in the first one.
Yeah, it's this kind of not physics, not cartoon physics thing, like she's floating through the air.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, she learns about the power of the truffle here, which is this very powerful, like, culinary confection. So the idea is that the person who eats it gets superpowers like strength and super speed. I also feel like this is kind of a prime example of the storytelling here being quite poor, where, like, her master is informing her that her granny was kidnapped and also tells her all about the truffle and how her granny knows about it. And then they go to this hiding place for the secret recipe, and the master seems fully surprised that the recipe is missing. You know?
And isn't even aware of it until Red points it out that it's no longer there.
Right. I just feel like there's something missing here that, like, how does this logically make any sense? Also, there's a fully rude call out of Rachel Ray. I don't know if you're familiar with Rachel Ray. She is this big cook who had her own show. And I think it's like Red's mentor who says, "The power of this goodie is so great, it must be ever kept from those who would misuse it. Like those wannabes at the Food Network." To which one of the other sisters says, "Holla, Rachel Ray's the devil." And I'm just like, what did this woman ever do? Why are we calling her out? It's not like she's some scandalous chef who has crimes or something. And it just, like, it instantly dates the movie in a way that I always find so annoying.
I was familiar with her by name, but
Yeah.
I mean, that call out makes it sound like she did something bad.
Yeah.
Maybe they
Which
should have taken Paula Deen instead.
should have done Paula Deen. She was right there, really. Yeah, or Mario Batali or something. I don't know. But I did laugh at it more out of surprise that Rachel Ray was randomly being shaded in the middle of this animated kids film, but not really laughing as like its own joke. So, anyway, Verushka brings Hansel and Gretel and Granny to this castle where Verushka forces Granny to make this secret truffle recipe, which I feel like we owe it to the listeners to read out what the ingredients are to this recipe, which I do have a screenshot of course, because they show it up as a card to the screen. If I may read it for the class.
Please do.
Okay, so it's 3 Tibetan cocoa sticks, 40 cups zebra-striped sugarcane, 5 gallons red root molasses, half a teaspoon of Amazonian grape juice, flour, no measurement there, just flour, 26 cups Sleeping Beauty's morning coffee, Rapunzel's organic strawberry and cream conditioner. I guess we're adding conditioner to this pot. Snow White's apple. I guess there's only one apple. Soylent Green, which I think in one of the funnier gags, it's crossed out as people.
Probably the best joke of the entire film. It's on there for a split second.
Yeah. And 1 bowl of 3 Bears porridge. Plus the secret ingredient, as we'll find out later, which is macadamia nuts.
Spoilers again.
I don't care. This movie deserves to be spoiled.
Yeah, I mean, listeners, there's no need to watch this film.
No, unless you are a true completist like me, or I'm forcing you to watch it and talk about it with me.
Yeah. Like me.
Yes. So what do you think of that recipe? Does that sound legit?
Well, it sounds quite poisonous if the Snow White's apples is in there. So I'm not sure if it's really safe to eat that. Also not sure about the soil and green part. It doesn't sound like... maybe they should have a veggie option instead.
I think so, yeah. Basically, we're putting in conditioner from Rapunzel's hair and an apple that is poisonous, and also it is like a cannibalistic situation as well. So... Anyway, Verushka more than hints that Granny and her have a past. Glenn does have a funny little dry line reading here that I noted. Not really the line itself, but just the deadpan way she says it, where she's like, have we met before? Was it the 60s? The 60s are kind of a blur. But yeah, as it turns out, Verushka and Granny had gone to the Sisters of the Hood training together way back in the day, and Granny was always the best at everything, and Verushka was always number 2, and so she was seething with jealousy. And she was apparently unable to make the truffle when Granny could, I think, unaware of this secret ingredient of macadamia nuts, spoiler alert. And so she spent the last 60 years searching for it. Her whole life's mission was this.
Her motivation for being an evil witch was basically that she was Salieri to Granny's Amadeus.
Yes.
Because it's apparently so horrible to be only the second best in the world at something that it haunts you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I must say, this is another example, I would say, of how bad the writing in general is of the film, because Granny is refusing to bake the thing, and then there's just one thread. Well, I'm gonna kill Hansel and Gretel instead, and ding, Granny says, "Okay, then I'm gonna do it." So this is you could do something about this scene, something to threaten her, maybe build up the tension, build up to something. But no, the first thing that I mean, after a throwaway joke with the TV, the first thing that the witch does makes Granny immediately say, "Okay, then I'm gonna do it to save the kids."
Yeah, it's very lazy, and so, yeah, it's also just like, this is a 70-year-old or maybe 80-year-old woman by this point, and she is still hung up on this incident of a classmate being a little bit better than her in a baking competition. And I guess some other things too, but still. And look, lifelong grudges can happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I don't know if it would radicalize me to become like a villainous terrorist, per se. Meanwhile, this all leads the gang to this giant who is suspected of being involved in some of the stolen ingredients for the truffle recipe. Also, there's a line here that I took note of here where this giant is described as a reputed smuggler, a juggler, a robber, a cobbler, a picker, a grinner, a restaurateur, and blogs about animated films. To which the wolf says...
He should get a life.
He should get a life. Yes.
I think that was fairly... that was aimed at us.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, I felt very attacked by that line.
Yes, and this also parallels with a comment in the first film, which I don't know if we talked about, where Wolf said he wishes he had a job like a movie critic when he's like trudging through something at one point. Just a weird sort of animosity that seems like it could be poking fun, but also seems a little hostile, you know?
Yeah. A bit like in Godzilla, the Roland Emmerich version, where Roland Emmerich specifically cast two actors who look like Siskel and Ebert in them. It's about that level of petty.
Pretty much.
But not as much fun.
No, certainly not. Well, anyway, they do get a tip at one point from Boingo the Bunny, the villain from the first film, being kind of involved in all this, and is like calling the giant to find new ingredients for this truffle recipe. Naturally, Boingo is now in an asylum, and when they greet him, you can very easily guess what Boingo says, given the pop culture references that we've talked about. He says, "Hello, Clarice." And one of the gang is like, "Who's Clarice?" And Boingo says, "She is. Hi, Clarice." And it's like this person sharing some paraphernalia that actually turns out to be Verushka in disguise, with Boingo like giving her more info about the ingredients that are needed for this recipe. So then when you actually consider Verushka's character and like where she came from, this is what makes no sense to me at all. Because Verushka had the training from the Sisters of the Hood, so she would presumably know much more about like the secret code to crack this recipe, because it's also kind of in code. And you would think that she might have more people and connections and insight into certain rare ingredients. So why is she relying on Boingo, this random bunny who wasn't trained, to crack this code? How would he even know that?
Yeah, she literally has the recipe where only the one ingredient is missing.
Yes.
So it really is just thrown in there without rhyme or reason. No. The film plays it as one of its reveals that this random woman was Verushka, whereas I immediately thought that looks like Verushka when we first saw her, because Verushka has a very distinctive hairstyle.
Yeah.
So it's not that much of a surprise.
No. And
at least Red hasn't seen her before in the film, I think, but Wolf should have recognized her as well.
Yeah. He's dropping the ball there. Yeah, and it just like this for me is like a case in point for the writers just not fleshing out their ideas to make it make sense, even within this cartoon logic of this world, like you were saying earlier, because you can be wacky and goofy and cartoonish, but I feel like there should at least be some consistency about the rules within the film. This just feels like it's kind of slapdash together just to shoehorn in a cameo from the villain from the first film, even though nobody was asking for that. We don't need Boingo back. It's not like people were clamoring for Boingo.
And also, it makes it feel like Boingo is a more important character in the bigger whole than it actually is. It's just, again, he's in one scene only, and then he's gone again.
Yep. So, there you go. Could have been easily taken.
It doesn't even turn out he's good at the end of the film.
No, exactly. Anyway, so there's another thing I wanted to point out, too, involving Twitchy, which you may have picked up on as well, with the voice work here.
Yeah, I read up that something about his voice isn't sped up, but just pitched up. Like in the first film, he was sped up, which was the whole joke about him is that he's speaking so fast that you can barely understand him. Mm-hmm. And this was created by speeding up. And here he's just speaking, the voice actor speaking very fast, and it's going to be pitched up, which doesn't quite have the same effect.
No. That's the thing, because I really noticed it in the scene where it's Twitchy is giving Wolf like a pep talk, basically, about how like you need to go out there and Red needs you because Granny is all alone. She needs her help, even if she won't admit it, all this stuff. But the way it's spoken is so bizarre and inconsistent from, it felt like a re-recording from a studio note about, us not being able to understand Twitchy. So he's speaking slower, but it's just higher pitch, like you said. And so I'm just even the voice work is inconsistent.
Voice work in such an integral character that we've all grown to love and couldn't stop thinking about since the first film.
Sure. Well, I mean, he was one of the highlights for me, so it did.
I mean, that is true. He was he was one of the memorable parts of the first film.
I'd say so.
And he doesn't really get anything to do in this one, even although he's around constantly.
Yes. He does also say at one point another thing that took me out of the film entirely after we get to the plot of suddenly the three little pigs are back in and they're these gun-toting mercenaries and they try to intercept Wolf and Twitchy and they blow up the agency, first of all, which is bizarrely violent. This very dated moment that I want to mention is when Twitchy says, "I'm gonna tweet this." And one of the pigs is like, "What's a tweet, man? Who is this for?"
Not for us, apparently.
Not for us. Not for anyone. Not for the kids. Not for the adults, really. So, very stupid. Anyway, this all leads to the big castle, and Red completely blows it when she finally gets to the room where Granny's being held in the castle and notices the truffle being made and tastes it and realizes it needs macadamia nuts, which is the secret ingredient, which you know by now as I've spoiled it multiple times. But for some reason, she says this out loud, which is very stupid, I must say, because Hansel and Gretel are right there. Not that she knows that they're evil at this point, but use some deductive reasoning. So they now know what to do. And so, yeah, Red says she screwed this up when she meets up with Granny again. And I have to agree, she did. But
yeah,
Granny is the better person than me because she's very forgiving of Red, being like, it's okay. You know what the recipe needed, and only a true sister would know that. All this stuff. But Red is feeling very guilty about also trying to be a hero on her own, and she's all down in the dumps. And so Granny gives her the little life lesson of a person can never really fail unless they give up. So, again, that's, I guess, the emotional backbone here.
I guess. And I have to admit, by this point, I had long given up on this film. So
Great.
I think I think that I realized at that point that I could no longer succeed, but I still powered through until the end.
I'm very proud of you for powering through until the end, even though it's a 86-minute movie.
Yeah, but it felt much longer because of the constant barrage of things that were just randomly thrown in.
I know. Well, that, too, is where we get to the big action set piece of Hansel and Gretel. They complete the truffles, and then they become these two big babies. I don't know if you ever watch Rugrats, but there's a whole big baby thing in that, where it's just this frightening, large child, essentially, is kind of what they become. And that's where Kirk and the yodelers come in and kind of save the day by busting in and saving them. To which Granny says, I also wrote this down, "Them's some jiggy yodelers." Only an actress like Glenn can make a line like that work. I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's true.
Yeah, but Verushka nearly falls off the cliff of this castle, but Granny decides to be the bigger person once again and saves her. And as she says, "I want you to know you are never number two to me." So is essentially forgiving her just like that. She knows she's not a deep down bad person and that she just got caught up in her jealousy. So, it looks like at this point a Glenn character is once again getting to be the smartest person in the room, or seeing the bigger picture in all of this.
Well, yeah, but in fairness, in that particular room she's in, it's not very hard to be the smartest person.
Yes.
Look at all the others there.
Yeah, there's not anyone really in contention for that.
But of course, this act of grace immediately turns Verushka into an ally, and she's now one of the heroes of the film and helps fights alongside them.
Yes, just like that, 60 years of trauma is gone, and it's just they get to be besties.
Yeah. And no trust issues at all.
Yeah.
No, not even a second thought on behalf of a single person. Not a single person is thinking, can we really trust her now? They immediately, as if nothing ever, as if there had never been a problem between them.
Yeah. I mean, that just seems to be the logic of this film is like whatever has happened in previous scenes doesn't apply to whatever we're doing now. So, I mean, that's where we get to the real like Marvel blockbuster kind of ending, essentially, where Hansel and Gretel are now these two giant monsters terrorizing the city. That is like a very clear stand in for New York. But Granny mentions like a certain trick, which is, as she says, one truffle makes you super, but a whole batch and you're as helpless as a beach ball.
Which is something the film basically invents on
Yeah.
the spot to give it all a happy ending. It's something that was never even hinted at before that, because it's
No.
just let's have them another bite and then they're poof and they're just helpless, rolling around, and we have defeated them. They're still large, they're
Yeah.
still giants, but we have defeated them.
Yes. I don't entirely understand the logic of this, but I guess truffles being truffles, they have their downsides of being high in fat and caloric density, and that's just makes them turn into beach balls. Sure.
Must be the conditioner in it.
Probably the conditioner and a little bit of the apple too. I don't know. But anyway, I don't really have a whole lot else about the movie. It all wraps up in a nice tidy bow. Do you have any other stray observations?
Maybe two.
Okay.
At one scene, Red is trying to figure out what DC and T means,
Mm-hmm.
and the film just throws a whole bunch of stores and shops and whatever that are abbreviated with DCT, and there are a few ones that I actually like duck capture and taxidermy, and
Oh yeah.
desserts, candy, and toothpaste. These two that I rather liked. That's probably the second best joke of the film after Soylent Green.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing, we haven't mentioned the giant spider yet,
No.
because in the end of the film, there's suddenly a giant spider, which
Her name is Bitsy. Say her name.
Bitsy.
Thank
Yes, everyone's scared of Bitsy. Bitsy is evil. Bitsy is also creating havoc.
you.
Um, until suddenly Bitsy is one of the good guys as well, because Verushka just found out that she too is just a misunderstood soul, and then she's helping everyone else fighting these two giant kids as well.
Yes. Yeah, people can really just turn on a dime, or not even people, spiders too. So, a nice life lesson for the kids is that people can just change on a dime.
It's a miracle that Boingo didn't fight alongside them at the end.
I know, at this point, might as well join them. Turns out he was like a secret good guy the whole time. Hayden Panettiere's voice work, I think, is fine. It's not as distinctive to me as Anne Hathaway. She gets to have more fun in the first one, but, you know, does the job fine. Martin Short comes in place of Jim Belushi. You know, I wish he got to do a little bit more.
I mean, Martin Short is always fun. He just like Glenn, he did what he was required to do, and he did what he could with what was given to him.
Mm-hmm.
He had a significantly shorter part than Glenn had, but he is probably one of the more memorable performances in the film.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to point out is also the poster for this, which I find very funny, not for the image itself, but for the credits listed at the top, because it lists the actors. We have Glenn Close, Cheech and Chong, who played the three little pigs, Bill Hader, Hayden Panettiere, A.B. Poehler, and Martin Short. And first of all, if I were Patrick Warburton, I would be a little upset about not being included when Cheech and Chong are, who barely factor into anything. Also, Joan Cusack is here. She is a pretty significant name. She's not there either.
He's an Oscar nominee.
She is a 2-time Oscar nominee by this point. Yeah, and technically was in and Out with Glenn as well. But yeah, like also the credits for that though, when I actually think about it, of like I would watch a live action movie with that exact cast, with Glenn being first billed.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, it's the old Gene Siskel rule. Would you rather watch a documentary about these people in the cast having lunch than that movie? I would definitely rather watch these people having lunch before I would watch this film again.
Yeah, that would be a hoot. Imagining all of that. And also Hayden Panettiere being in the middle of like all these comedic stars too. Yeah, that's Hoodwinked Too. That's the end of the Hoodwinked saga, sadly, for somebody.
For now.
For now. Wow. What a threat.
I mean, who knows? We could we are rebooting everything. Who says we cannot reboot Hoodwinked?
Yeah.
People want more Hoodwinked. Get Anne Hathaway back. Get Anne Hathaway and Hayden Panettiere back, and we get the Hoodwinked multiverse.
Whoa. Okay. Multiverses are big these days, so this is a very good idea. Someone out there is listening and is writing notes for this.
I hope not.
I hope not either. Yeah. But like also Granny is like pretty old in these movies. So like is she still around?
Of course she is.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, look at her. She keeps in shape.
That's true.
She is a sister of the hood. I mean,
okay.
She's powering through.
Yeah.
I can see her strolling around with the walker and then suddenly doing kung fu kicks and surprising everyone with how agile she still is at the ripe old age of, I don't know, 123.
You're giving whoever's listening, you're giving them so many good ideas here. Because I can see this all very clearly.
Arguably better ideas than were in the film we just talked about.
1,000%. Anyway, that's Hoodwinked Too. Let's move on to the release of this movie, because I don't know if you read up on this, but it's quite, or if you even remember it, possibly, but quite a rocky situation we had here.
I mean, I don't remember this film being released. I don't even remember this film existing. So I'll be surprised what you have to tell me now.
Yes. Okay. Well, the film was basically in the can in 2009 and scheduled for release in January of 2010. And this was once again a Weinstein Company movie, just like the first one. And the Weinsteins were focused on another film they had called Youth in Revolt, which was releasing around that same time. So they delayed Hoodwinked to February. Also, around that time, they would release like toys at Burger King for this movie, and it was delayed a full year. And so that's kind of awkward, because they and the production company were apparently at odds about certain things, wanting to tweak the animation. Also, with Avatar being such a big blockbuster success around that time, they wanted to release it in 3D, even though it was not filmed for that. And yes.
I don't even want to imagine this in 3D.
I'm sure it looked wonderful in the theater. Luckily, we did not see that at home. But yeah, communication fell through between production and the Weinsteins, leading to the film being further delayed. Finally, it was released at the Tribeca Film Festival on April 23rd, 2011, followed by a theatrical release on April 29th. And the Weinsteins really kind of screwed this movie over if you look at some of the other releases that weekend. So it debuted at number 6, making only $4 million. And there were multiple films at the box office that weekend that were actually aimed at kids and families that were already out, including Hop and Soul Surfer and Prom and Rio. So Prom and Rio did better than Hoodwinked. Water for Elephants was also that weekend, plus Medea's Big Happy Family. And the number one was another huge new release, Fast 5. So this movie never had a chance of being a success.
This sounds like terrible choices upon terrible choices.
Yes.
I mean, the fact alone that they had toys selling at Burger King long time before the film was even released. This must have been very awkward for Burger King. I mean,
yeah.
I can't believe they were happy about that situation.
Nope. When their movie that they're doing a tie-in promotion of comes out 16 months later, I'm sure they were not pleased. But it was a box office bomb, grossing only $10 million domestic, $23 million worldwide, which is just an abysmal total for an animated film being released wide, especially one that had a mildly successful predecessor, which made over $100 million. That's a pretty rough downturn. And critics really blasted it as well. This is sadly one of Glenn's lowest rated films of her career, with a score of only 11% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Rough but fair.
Yeah, right. They really bashed the movie, saying the animation was bad, the writing was bad, it didn't have the same kind of plucky spirit as the original, and it was really thought of as kind of a cash grab. And, like, yeah, very little positive other than a little bit of praise for Bill Hader and Amy Poehler's voice work, but that was pretty much it. So, why do we think Hoodwinked 2 just didn't really come together in the end in terms of production or release or critics or audiences or anything?
For all the reasons we've been talking about in the past
Yeah.
hour, because it's just a bad film on nearly all levels with very few upsides to it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It was also, it really was just such a bad release, but also I think it was just thought of as too cheap too. Like, I think it really aspires to have that sort of 4-quadrant Shrek audience, but it never really pierced through in that way, like in a pop culture way. So even fewer people were interested in the sequel. So yeah, and I also just think the appetite for this kind of movie too, the whole pop culture fairy tale thing, feels like it sort of died out after the third or fourth Shrek movie, where it's just like, okay, people are kind of moving on around this time.
Bad timing and bad movie.
Bad timing, bad movie, bad combination. So unless you have anything else, we can get to our last segment.
I think we can go there.
I think we're ready to put this fairy tale to bed. Close the book. So, yes, we're going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. Thinking about her performance and where this sits in her career, would you say with this reprisal of Granny, she's ready for her close-up, close but no cigar, low Glenergy, Glennicent, serving in silence? What do you think?
We're somewhere between low Glenergy and Glennicent here, because the movie is really bad. She doesn't have a lot to work with. She still turns in solid work. So if I'm inclined to be nice, I would say Glennicent.
Are you inclined to be nice?
You're asking me so nicely that I'm gonna just be nice. There could be a case made that this could also be local energy just because she gets so little to work with. But I would say with the few things she does make the film better than better is a better is not a good word for this film. Less worse than it could have been. So I think we could defend a Glennicent rating for this.
Yes. This for me is also a Glennicent, and I was very tempted to do a low Glenergy here. Obviously, this is a very low lift from Glenn, where she does have even less to do than in the first film, and she doesn't really have those kind of poppy, memorable lines, really, but none of this is really her fault, and she is very consistent with who she was in the first film. Maybe she gets a little outshone by, like, Bill Hader and Amy Poehler and kind of Patrick Warburton at times, but still, I think she is putting in fine work, so I'm not going to blame her at all for anything that went wrong around her. So that's that. That is Hoodwinked 2.
Aren't we happy that there are no more animated movies with Glenn Close and animals in the future?
I have bad news for you, Christof. So I don't know if you heard, but this past year, there was a new adaptation of Animal Farm directed by one Andy Serkis, which I hear is...
Oh, that sounds promising.
It sounds like a slam dunk, right? So can't wait to see what that's all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this must be finally a great film again.
Yes. So excited for you specifically to return to the show for that one, which I am telling you and not asking you. Anyway, on that note, Christof, thanks for joining me. I hope you had fun at least exercising this movie out of your system.
My pleasure to talk to you as always. Not my pleasure to watch the film before.
Fair enough. Well, where can people find more of you on the internet?
You can find me on Blue Sky as Christof N. You can find me on Letterboxd, and you can find me on Sporcle, where I'm your curator for the German and Logic subcategories. And recently started a new series of quizzes about the top 20 films of the year as chosen by Sight and Sound.
Oh, that's fun. Sounds right up the alley of our listeners.
Getting a bit away from the Oscar quizzes I did for a long, long time, just settling with something else for a while.
Nice. Kind of like me with this show, with my podcasting.
Exactly.
Yes, moving away from the Oscars for a little bit. Maybe I'll return. We shall see. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram, just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race. That's And the Runner-Up Is on all platforms. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow The Glenn Pod. Rate, review, and follow on all platforms. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.